Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Death by Adaptation podcast, a bi-weekly book club where we choose one classic book and compare and contrast it against its cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolò Grasso, and I'm joined as always by Ewan Gleadow. How are you doing, Ewan?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. No, I'm alright, you know me.
Is ready, focused up?
Hang on in there. You know that squirrel in Cat in the Hat where he cuts his tail off and it cuts to the screen and the squirrel's like, oh, hang in there, buddy. That's how I feel this year, like that. Which I think is it's a reference that many people will get because I know the Cat in the Hat movie is beloved by many. So
Cinematic classic, you could say.
it is. It's great.
Why haven't we done Cat in the Hat yet?
Is there a book? Oh yeah, there is. Yeah. Fantastic.
Oh my god.
I thought it was Mike Myers original.
Just birthed from his deranged creative mind.
Hey, it's better than Wayne's World.
Shots fired. Today, I'm not joined exclusively by my co-host Ewan, but we also have two very special guests, recurring guests of the podcast, and also very good friends in general. First of all, Hilary White. You've heard her laughter, trying to contain it during that opening from Ewan. How are you doing, Hilary?
So far so good. We'll see how I feel by the time this is over.
It's going to be a long and interesting conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, today is a Valentine's Day special, and it wouldn't be a Valentine's Day special if we didn't have Carson Timar in the house. How are you doing, Carson? Welcome back.
You know, there are so many classic love stories we could do, but we could do Romeo and Juliet, we could do any, but every year you just bring me on for these ones. But fun fact for the audience, unless my memory is incorrect, I never signed up for this. When you were like creating your episodes, you just added me to the Trello card and you were like, yeah, I'm sure Carson would read Twilight. So
of course,
here I am. I did it.
You know it. That's exactly how it went. I was like, yeah, Carson likes Twilight. Yeah, Carson will come. He likes these things, I think. I don't know. It was such a big success with 50 Shades of Grey last year. But I had to have you back on board with this episode.
Of course.
And of course, everyone who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in for this episode. As always, remember, if you like this show, follow us, leave a like, 5 stars, whatever rocks or boats. Just makes us super, super happy. And of course, it's the new year. January is over with. We're in February, and we need to have a very, very special Valentine's Day episode, which is why, like Carson just said, we gotta do the easy ones, the nice romances, something that's not problematic and not very touchy as a conversation, you could say. Which is why this year, to celebrate the day of love, the day of romance, the day for all the couples in the world, regardless of where you are and who you love. This is why today we're talking about Stephenie Meyer's Twilight.
You're impossibly fast and strong. Your skin is pale white and ice cold. Your eyes change color. And sometimes you speak like you're from a different time. You never eat or drink anything. You don't go out in the sunlight. How old are you?
17.
How long have you been 17?
A while.
I know what you are.
Say it. Out loud. Say it.
Vampire.
I don't even know where to begin with Twilight and with Stephenie Meyer in general, because personally speaking, this is the first and only book I've read of hers. I don't know how anyone else here feels about her, but we'll definitely get into that. But Twilight is a book, it's a YA fantasy horror romance that was published in 2005 by Stephenie Meyer. It tells the story of young Bella Swan, this young girl who has to move away from her mother to go live with her father in this very rainy city, the rainiest town in the USA, as she describes it. And there she falls in love with this mysterious haunted figure in her school, Edward Cullen, who turns out to be dun 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 a vampire. Hillary, what are your thoughts on Stephenie Meyer's Twilight, this seminal piece of work for young adult literature?
I hate this book with every fiber of my being. That's all I'm going to say for now. Maybe we should go around.
It's keeping it short and sweet. I love it.
I'll get to it
Carson.
later.
Oh yes, oh yes. How about you, Carson?
So my
you a
experience
fan?
with Twilight was always with the movies. So this was my first time reading the
Mm.
book, and I'll save my thoughts for the movies for later. But I was hopeful because last year, as you mentioned, we did 50 Shades of Grey, and I thought it was going to be terrible, and I ended up loving the books. So I was like, Twilight's going to be the same, and it's not good. Not only is it not well written, but like truly one of the most boring books I think I've ever read. I am shocked teenagers made it to the vampire stuff because it is quite literally for like seemingly 150 pages, the same high school schedule played out again and again. And I swear to God, if I ever hear Bella complain about going to PE again, I'm going to rip my brains out. But so it's not a good book. You know, I will say that. I'll leave it there. Not good. And even worse now that they changed the covers because now it's uglier
Oh
to
my!
look at.
Can you hold it up again, just
It's
for the
disgusting.
listeners in here?
Yeah, not a fan, man. Although
Oh,
it should
it's
be holding I said it should be holding a red flag instead of an apple.
Yeah,
You know,
that's good.
waving that around. Woo!
that's a good point. Oh my god, jeez. How about you, Ewan? Are you an outlier here?
Oh man,
you-
yeah, I think I am. I am. No, so a little bit of background. I've got the one that was like made in time for the movies. So it's got Robert Pattinson on, and I actually stole this copy of the book from a neighbor who's since moved out. I stole all four of their
Aw.
Twilight books.
Are they all
Um,
movie tie-in versions?
Yeah, that's the
Aw.
good stuff.
Heck
And
yeah.
I got about 100 pages into this, and I thought, oh, you know what, this is okay. This is all right. The dialogue is fucking horrific, but I thought, you know what, it's not bad. And then you kind of realize at some point, if you've got less brain rot than me, you'll realize it sooner. But at some point, you realize every other sentence just starts with "I," and it's just really basic and it's really shit, and it's just abysmal. And as soon as I clicked onto that, I just completely disengaged, and I couldn't get back in. I was like, "Oh, Stephenie, you've let me down, lad." But it's really bad, and the fact that my copy is 434 pages. It doesn't need to be this long. It doesn't need to be this boring. The fact that anything was salvaged out of adapting this to any form of other media is a genuine modern miracle, because this is shit. It is awful. But at least I can say I've read Twilight, in the same sense that when I bragged about reading 50 Shades of Grey, a lot of people laughed at me. So, swings and roundabouts, I suppose.
This one was easier to read in public, I'll say at least.
Ooh,
Very true.
I haven't left the house this month, so I just read it at my desk. I would finish work at 3, and I would read Twilight from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. That's how my week has been.
Oh, jeez.
I'm
It's
sorry.
not been a good week. I was wanting to read an autobiography that I was very interested in reading. I was going to read Bono's autobiography, but no, I've sat and read about how Edward Cullen, the 104-year-old vampire, has been grooming a 17-year-old student. So that was fun, I suppose. He just gaslights her into saying, "Oh, I'm not a vampire," and then he is. Brilliant.
I feel personally responsible for this. I apologize.
It's all right. I think
To
the
all
mental
of you.
breakdown, it was on the cards.
Yeah, we need it. We need it early on in the year so we can move on with our lives and kind of improve. It's all uphill from here, boys. And I don't know why I said boys. Anyway, Twilight. It's yes, this is not a good book. Just to put it plainly, it's not good. And I actually was optimistic as you, Carson, because I went into this thinking, the best thing about 50 Shades of Grey is that E.L. James knew this was smut. She knew she was writing erotica, which is a very specific goal, and it's to titillate. There's no pretenses, honestly, at least in the first book. The second, the others are more questionable, but at least the first one, it's back to basic, stripped down erotica. Twilight is messed up on so many levels. In terms of the writing style of Stephenie Meyer, it's baffling. I actually had to switch up. I was reading the book. I was like, I cannot really do this. I had to switch up to an audiobook, which was a much better experience since everything is narrated in first person. But it was still rough in certain passages. To call it problematic, it seems cliched in this sense, because everyone knows that Twilight doesn't portray the best love story and the most consensual love story in the world. There's a lot of problems there, but it really is worse than I was expecting, especially when compared to the movies. That's something that I really want to get into. Um, and I completely agree. It's just too long. It's so long, and it doesn't need. This should be like a 250 pages book. It's like get in, get out, 50 pages in. Oh, he's a vampire, 100 pages in. Oh, there's evil vampires, and then it's over. It's like amazing, great, nice. Um, I'm very much interested to kind of poke your brains a little bit and try to find out why. Why was Twilight a success? Why, in the span between 2005 when this came out and 2008, this was everywhere? I remember I was in elementary school, and this cover, of the red apple and just the hands coming out from it, just holding it. It was like it was everywhere, everywhere. When I was living on a very small island of Italy, so it's like it literally arrived everywhere in the world, you could say. Why do you think that is? I'm curious to hear, Hillary, your thoughts first.
Well, kind of like Carson, I wasn't aware of the book. I was aware of the movie, and it was shortly before it came out. I have some family members who are into YA literature, usually stuff that's better than this. I want to make sure that I'm speaking fairly about their tastes, but they would read everything. So it took me a while to get to the books. I did see the films first, and then in kind of a convoluted way, I ended up with the books. People ended up donating a bunch to me, and they said I could do with them whatever I wanted, and I eventually did in a video project I'll probably discuss later, but I ended up reading them all. And I was very perplexed, just kind of like you, Nicolò. I couldn't quite understand, personally from my point of view, why this was so popular. The only justification I can come up for is that it's a fantasy. It's a teenage girl's fantasy. Imagine being the center of just about everyone's attention all the time in your community, and then you're the new kid. Like, people are greeting in the parking lot, and everyone is in love with you and wants to date you. But even that is not good enough. You're almost immediately welcomed into a highly exclusive clique of people who are immortal. Also, they're incredibly good looking, they're rich. Some of them have superpowers, like the X-Men, which kind of comes up later in the other books. All of them seem to have superpowers. I mean, I think when you're really young, like, because I have gotten to know the fandom a bit better. I'm not in it, but people who openly talk about loving it, how young they were when they read these books. So it's kind of a self-insert fiction. I think a lot of people wish that what was happening in the book was happening to them. I can't really say why, but I think that's just having a new boyfriend who's super special and he's obsessed with you, who wants to know everything about you, and how, like, you would want to be courted by a teenage boy. But for me, this didn't come out when I was a teenager. I was older. I was like, I think I definitely was in high school when this came out. So, but even at that age, I just wouldn't have wanted someone to treat me this way. So I feel really on the outside. I assume this is someone's fantasy, but it's not mine.
Yeah, makes sense. I even think, especially considering that this kind of brought in a new era of YA novels. Because before, like around this time, were we at like the fifth or sixth Harry Potter book? It just come out, something like that. And that was a massive, massive success. But other than that, there was no real book series that managed to capture this type of, wish fulfillment fantasy, like you said. And yeah, that's probably why. Carson, Ewan, any
Yeah.
other thoughts?
I mean, I think it's interesting that you mentioned Harry Potter, because I was also kind of thinking that. And, like, I don't know how much of a crossover there really is between, like, the Twilight fandom and the Harry Potter fandom. I feel like this is one of those first big things that could socially be relevant like that was also not, like, a nerd thing. Like, I feel like Harry Potter, like, the popular girls who I hung out with, and I was maybe one of those people, were like, oh, that's for, like, children. I'm not going to do that. But if you can also then relate to being a moody teenager who wants to fall in love with a vampire, this really works. Sadly, I was after Twilight. Well, probably for the better of me, I was a Hunger Games kid. But, you know, it's a very similar
Yeah.
pathway from Twilight to Hunger Games. Divergent's probably in there, the Maze Runner, right? Like, this did start an era where, like, for kids who thought being a wizard sounded lame, this is something you can sink your teeth into. And then even if no one likes it, as soon as one person's reading it, everyone is reading it. Everyone wants to be part of that like clique who can relate and be like, oh, I love Edward and I love Jacob. That duality became very popular. You had to pick a side, right? Like, it's all there. I see why it's popular. Wish it wasn't, right? Not good material to go popular, but like, I at least understand why like Hot Topic could be like selling every type of merchandise possible for this.
Oh, jeez. I can only imagine. I don't know, Ewan, if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, I
insight.
was 5 years old when the first Twilight book came out, so I wasn't
Thank
like
God.
I wasn't like, aware of its presence at the time. I was still like sneezing into my baby food and sort of shitting myself. That was the 5-year-old life. So to kind of, my generation still felt the ripple. My age group still felt the aftershock of Twilight. It really did stick around. I think the movies are the fault of that. So a lot of the people that I know and grew up with were kind of fans of the movies before they were fans of the books, but then they went and read the books, and it's kind of the only thing they read. Like Carson, I'm a Hunger Games man. They are the tits. They're brilliant. But to be fair, I live in the northeast of England, so I feel very much like I live in fucking District 12. So that kind of appealed to me as a kid. Twilight, though, it was the aftershock of the fantasy boom. Really, it was. It never really had much of a presence in the UK until the movies came out. I don't think. Like, I was doing a bit of research, and it was still like that. The Harry Potter wave took over because Harry Potter was set in the UK, and everybody was, are you a Muggle or do you like Harry Potter? And either way, you're a fucking nerd, so it didn't really matter. But yeah, the actual like appeal of Twilight, I do understand. It is that main character syndrome that people have these days, whether you're on a white bicycle and stroll through country lanes and cycle the way through to the nearest coffee shop and think, oh, how twee and lovely my life is. I get it. I understand it. I just wish there was one for me. But this, it's not my cup of tea. But I think we've severely underestimated how many teenage girls there are that think Twilight is what should happen to them.
Yes.
Clearly, there's an overlap between teenage girls and Bram Stoker fans, which is a market that Stephenie Meyer has really cornered quite well. So bravo.
She thought it was a niche, but it was much bigger.
I mean, it still kind of lingers on as sort of a postmodern thing of, oh, you're Team Edward or Team Jacob. It's an ironic thing. Surely, I'm not meant to pick a side. I'm Team Edward, by the way, but it's just one of those things you're not really meant to. Why am I getting a dirty look from Carson there? You can't be a Team Jacob. Oh my god! I'm sure we'll discuss that for the next hour and a half. But it's exactly that though. It's the Team Edward, Team Jacob thing. It's very smart. It's what hashtags on Twitter were before it really got popular. It's that discourse.
Yeah.
It's kind of the water cooler conversation that it caused. And as a book, it's a New York Times bestseller. So let's show it its dues. It's great.
That's the seal of quality.
Well, mine says now a major motion picture. That tends to mean something. It's on my copy of Blonde.
Anyway, no, it is all very, very fascinating to me, especially because it's also very hard to separate Twilight the book from the movie in terms of just the success. I'm interested to jump into that further in a few minutes. But definitely, actually, to talk about, because we're talking about the relationships, just I think the characters of Edward and Bella are just key in a shocking way, dare I say, but they're key to why this was successful. And that was the most impressive thing, just reading the book, is how unlikable Bella is. I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but since it's shocking, you're reading everything from her perspective, so you're supposed to empathize and sympathize with her. You're like, oh, okay, this poor tortured girl. And instead, no, I think you touched on it, Hillary, earlier. And she has the best life. I've moved around many times. I've moved in 6 cities from when I was a 2-year-old to when I was a 15-year-old. I've moved from multiple regions as well. The dream would be to actually be welcomed into a school in the way that she was. Um, how do you feel, Carson, about the character of Bella and just how she ends up living this lovely life of everyone loves you, everyone wants to be your friend, and you just you just spit on them, those plebs. They're too nice. They're too nice for me. I don't like that. I want to go with the trouble boy, the one who's just ignoring me. How do you feel?
I mean, she's not a great character now, is she? Right? Like, I don't know. She is very annoying. I would actually say, like, very negative. I would say that's probably the number one thing about her character. She hates everything. She hates the
Mm.
rain. She hates the snow. She hates the sun. Really makes you question what weather she would like to be in, because apparently it's none. I don't know. I just like she is so dull here, and that's something I feel about all the characters, and I cannot wait to talk about in the film. But like, she's just so dull and unlikable, but at the same time so clearly like I feel like they do not give her a personality because they want the audience to be like, oh, she's so me. So like, oh, I
Mhm.
hate PE. Oh, I also am like depressed, or like she is so me for real. And it's like, I don't know, it's just not captivating stuff here. I would not say she's a good protagonist. She does not interest me. I wish the best for her in life, right? Like, I guess I support her on a human level, but I would not say she succeeds beyond that very much.
That's one way to put it. And I also love it because I didn't actually realize. I thought, well, how old was Stephenie Meyer when she wrote this? And she wasn't that old. She was 32 years old when
Ugh.
this book came out.
Did you just say she wasn't that old and say she was 32? She's an
Yeah.
That's dead.
No, no.
I know she's an
I just meant
adult.
like I thought you were gonna say she's like 15. I was gonna be like, okay, I get it. She was depressed. At 32, I feel like you should be a little bit more advanced than this.
I like
Feel
to
like it
believe
should be.
someone at 32 remembers the trauma of high school. I mean, maybe this is her wish fulfillment. Maybe she wants to be like Bella. I wish everyone liked me when I was moving
She went to her
around.
high school reunion, and that's it. She went to her high school reunion, walked around the halls, and was like, "Oh, I hate this." And everyone was like, "Oh, I'm doing all this cool stuff," and she was like, "Well, I'm gonna write Twilight," and then she did.
To be fair, I think at the age of 32, you should be able to write a bit better.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Oh.
Definitely. Thank you.
I don't mean to drop a truth bomb as the kids say these days, but you should definitely be able to construct sentences that don't start with I while you're in your 30s.
But it's in first person, Ewan. It's
You
her
can do first person
thoughts.
without the use of first person language. I do it all the time.
You've got to
Well,
vary it. You've got to push yourself.
Did you
And you
say
got to
I
put down
do it
your
all the time?
we do it all the time. Ewan does it all the time. There we go.
It is done.
It's to be fair, I don't hate the sort of first person stuff as much as I hate the dialogue. I'm sure we'll get to the dialogue. The dialogue's atrocious.
boy.
Like, just as a fundamental, this isn't how humans speak to each other. And it's I know Carson wishes Belle well on a human level. I do not. It is that hashtag so me, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm just Belle, and then I thought I'm just a really grumpy arsehole though, and I don't really like the weather that much. So I thought, yeah, this is the book for me. But I mean, not to sound controversial, but I've never fallen in love with a vampire, so it's difficult
Not
for me to
yet.
relate on that. Not yet, not yet. There is time in my
Doesn't-
tender old age of 23. If 32's old, I don't know what that makes me, Nick. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
Time
very
marches
young.
on. I don't feel it.
Still a wee
Maybe
teenager.
that's why I need to meet a vampire, because then I can live forever and I can work on my art, which is apparently reviewing shit music.
Did you see
But
The Invitation? You just need that
The
to happen to
Invitation.
you. Yeah.
No, I wasn't invited.
Oh.
No, I've been meaning to watch it, but then I was going to actually genuinely watch it next month. But Twilight's put such a bad taste in my mouth with anything vampire related. I just don't want to watch anything that's got vampires in it.
That's valid.
I
Yeah,
like the
Belle's
weirdly
awful.
enough. Weirdly
It's
enough,
fun.
It's the equivalent of fan fiction, better fan fiction than Twilight is when it comes to vampire stories. And even then, that's always been a subject of great debate about what Stephenie Meyer does here, because she completely changes the vampire mythos and just how vampires work. Because of course here Edward is this tortured soul, he's a vampire, but the big thing is that, crosses, don't do nothing. Garlic, doesn't change much. Sunlight makes us glitter. We're shiny. We're shiny under the sunlight, and we can actually walk around normally when it's clouded. It's overcast. I'm curious, Hillary, how do you feel about just the way that, like, do you like what Stephenie Meyer does here with the vampire mythos, how she changes them up?
Uh, well, no. Um, I mean, and that's pretty obvious. But I think that I would probably feel stronger about it. Like, if there are people I've met who have very emotional ties to vampire literature, vampire
Mm,
lore, and this kind of lore is insulting to them some way because they get emotional about it. I can't say I've been invested in that way, so I can't complain like, "Oh, she changed everything," and I'm upset about it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
mm,
It's romanticizing and softening the vampire mythos, which is, they can go in the daytime, and if they go in the direct daylight, they sparkle or whatever. And they're dazzling creatures, and they're very, very beautiful. They're also cold and hard like stone, which, as far as I know, is a new thing. And in the later books, they do talk about how they're filled with venom, which is both an adhesive that keeps them together, and it's also a lubricant, which doesn't make any sense. Um, Edward's mouth is full of venom. That's why he has to always kiss Bella with a closed mouth because it'll burn her face. Like, there's so much. I mean, part of the
so
reason,
much depth, you
so
could
much,
say.
yeah, there was. And actually, just kind of as an intro to my journey figuring out what this all was about. I mean, my
Mm,
cousin really liked the books and she wanted to go see the movie, and her family did not support her at all because they're all into different things, and she wanted to go see this vampire love story movie. So I said I'd go with her, but I didn't know what it was. So I looked it up on the internet, and I found like crazy FAQs from fans, like explaining everything that, things that Stephenie Meyer had written, like, when Bella has her period, what does Edward do? And Stephenie Meyer's like, well, when she bleeds during her period, it's dead blood. It's not real blood. So Edward could be around her. Like, no respect to biology or
okay.
human logic in any way, shape, or form. So her vampire mythos, I don't like it, but I think what irritates me a little bit, as far as like saying something positive about the series, is that she has a really interesting premise. What would happen if something that hunted humans developed feelings for them, but what if that story about them becoming, whether they became a couple or just like any relationship whatsoever, what if it was just different and more mature and not so horny all the time, horny and angry. Um, it's not that bad of a premise, but the way she executes it is just awful. Just
Yeah, I definitely feel as well that there's more so than other earlier classic gothic vampire literature like Bram Stoker's work or Carmilla or all
mhm.
of those. I do really much feel that she must have been inspired by Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, which
Yeah,
became this genuine like foundational text that brought new life to the vampire genre for the better. I'll also use this as an opportunity. PSA, everyone go watch AMC's Interview with the Vampire. It's a wonderful show. It's so good. It's so good. It actually moves forward. What Anne Rice did with those books. Um, Go watch it. It's good. But I I I I kind of want to play devil's advocate and kind of respect a little bit what Stephenie Meyer tried to do, just on a purely conceptual level, thinking, okay, we've had over a century of the same type of vampire. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to change it up. If you can change up some of the rules for werewolves or zombies or whatnot, why can't you do it with vampires? Um, the only thing is that she kind of removes what makes vampires such memorable creatures. It kind of
yeah,
backfires, especially with what you said. It's I think the main appeal of the vampire character, outside of the sexual allure, you could say, the seductive nature of it, it's the fact that it's very much human like, and it's an outcast. And constantly I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, you want to portray them as outcasts, but they actually look super cool. The Cullens, they are the edgy teenagers at school. They're not outcasts. They choose to become outcasts themselves. They're not outcasts by society or by those around them. That's the thing. And there's not a single moment where there's a negative vibe inside the school. There's never this feeling of like, oh yeah, maybe the others don't really like them because they do something. I mean, it's like, no, they just stay by themselves and just sit at a table, have maybe just incestuous relationships with one another because they're all adopted. It's like, oh yeah, but they're also together, but it's fine, it's not illegal. Like,
Mm.
okay, that's weird note. That's a weird thing to point to. Whatever, we'll let it slide for now. It's all those things that kind of, for me at least, I want to respect the idea of, let's do something different with the vampires, and instead she does something so different that it's not even a vampire anymore. It kind of loses that element for me, which is a
Well,
shame.
I have to point out something
Hmm.
that kind of gets lost in the shuffle is that, I mean, as far as like the sparkling and the venom, that kind of stuff, and then like the whole pregnancy thing and imprinting all that garbage.
Oh
I mean,
yes.
that's hers. But there's things that were quite obvious to me when I thought about it, that Stephenie Meyer was just taking things from other creators, like the whole Buffy Angel relationship and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's a vampire falls in love with a teenage girl. It's the same thing with the Suki, or no, yeah, the like the True Blood books. I can't remember the name of the actual novels right now. That's also about vampires
Ooh.
falling in love with humans. These are all
Mhm.
came out, of course, way before Twilight did. And then lastly, I'm pretty sure she watched the WB show Roswell, because the premise is the same. A girl goes to like a new school, and there's like a dark, mysterious stranger with his family who's really kind of remote from everybody. And then he saves her life because she gets shot or something like that. He heals her with her
Oh.
hand and finds out that he's an alien, and they start a
Oh,
relationship. So
this is called
even if
Roswell.
it's called Roswell. And the
Never
crazy
heard of
thing
it.
is, you can look up the scene and I'm pretty sure you can find on YouTube of the scene where he saves her, and it's shot exactly the same way. Like he puts his hand on her abdomen and like they stare at each other really intensely. It's very much the same. So a lot of stuff that
Oh.
Meyer took was is not original, and there's even pieces like novels and movies and other things that she took and made her own. But all the like the fucked up stuff, that's her. She totally made that up.
Thankfully, we stand Stephenie Meyer. I think this is a good point to kind of transition as well into the movie itself, because there's some interesting differences between the book and the film, and I think especially all of us here have a long history with the movie that came out in 2008, directed by Catherine Hardwicke and starring everyone's favorite Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson as Belle and Edward. The role that catapulted them to stardom, for better and for worse. I'm curious to know everyone's history here with the Twilight movie. Carson, why don't you go first?
So I didn't watch this thing until like a couple of years ago because like I
Really?
lived with a Republican family. They were not going to bring me to Twilight. My older sister were
Uh,
definitely like Twilight, that's stupid. So like had no reason to check out Twilight until like 2020, let's say. And hot take, I love the movie. I think it's really fun. Yes, morally, are there issues? Absolutely. But I think if you look at this as like a small, independent, like like gothic romance text, I think it works really well. I don't know. I really enjoy the first film. I think the rest of the series is pretty much trash, but like the first film, very fun. I think it's iconic. So that's my truth.
preach, Carson, preach. How about you, Ewan?
It's my dad's favorite movie series, isn't it?
A man
So
of taste.
man of taste. He's got all the Blu-rays, and he's given them to me. So I
Did you
watched it
bring
with
him to the
Chris.
cinema for the re-release?
No, because I was
Ah,
no, because the closest cinema to me is like 40 miles away. I live in the outskirts of hell. Um, but I remember the first time I watched Twilight, I'll have been about 17, 18, so just
hey.
older than the target audience, and I hated it. And I rewatched it yesterday with my mate, and we loved it. It was so much fun. It was fucking hilarious. Really funny, like really, really funny. Iconic is the word for it. It's it's no right to be that funny. Um, it manages to capture the sense of the novel, but also take the piss out of it in equal measure. It's wonderful. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like it takes all the good elements. Like, let's be fair, there are some good elements, and we kind of touched on those. I do think genuinely that the advancements that Myers tries to make to vampirism, like the sparkly stuff and their sort of moral battle between, just draining people of blood and killing animals, I do think those are interesting points. obviously they're not played up in the film because the eye candy of Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart is kind of the main focus, and it's not played up in the book because the book is written by a fucking 7-year-old. So it's kind of, swings and roundabouts. But I really enjoyed the movie, and kind of like if I was drunk, I'd have really just cried at it. I do have all the Blu-rays, so I will watch them all at once if I ever feel like I really need to just power down my brain. Yeah, it's hard because it's like it's clearly not a good movie, but it's a good movie. It's one of those.
Makes sense. Now I kind of want to find like semi-official drinking games for the movie and just see what's recommended for shots and for just downing
Take a
your
shot
drink.
every time a cullen appears. That'll
Oof,
do.
oof. Just down your drink when they're all together.
Get the Campari
Clustered
out,
down.
Nick. Get the Campari.
Get the
in.
Campari.
That 70% proof nonsense. God.
No, I did. I actually did that. Someone
Oh,
gave me
no.
a 100 proof bottle of vodka, and I was supposed to take a drink when I can't even remember what the stipulations were. I was watching with a bunch of friends, and by the time it got to the restaurant scene, I was blackout drunk, and I was like,
It's like an hour in.
I've never been blackout drunk in my life before. But they told me that like I started like yelling and like turning things over and screaming and saying like this movie's bullshit and stuff like that, and they had to like pin me down, and then I passed out. So don't do that. Don't do a drinking game with Twilight. That's the only time I've ever acted out while I've been intoxicated in my entire life, and it's because of that movie.
Only good memories I can see from.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Twilight.
I eventually came to. I've told this story so many times, but not in a podcast before. But what happened is that when I came to, I like woke up in the middle, and one of my friends had rolled me to the foot of a couch, and he trapped me with his legs, and they were playing magic cards, and they were like, "You're not moving or talking anymore," and I was like, "Fine."
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How about your history with the film outside of this lovely anecdote?
Yes, I have so many anecdotes about Twilight. That could be a podcast series, but I guess maybe I should segue into how I feel about the film.
Yeah.
My cousin, once again, she was the one who wanted to go see it, so I went and saw it with her and my mother. And I, even though I kind of had looked up on the internet to figure out what it was, I was so unprepared. Like I can't ever have that experience again because it got like the whole thing. I was like, this is a joke, right? Like this isn't real. Like this is a comedy. This is a comedy, right? And then it got to the scene where he says, "I waited my whole life. You don't know how long I've waited." And I was in the theater thinking to myself, like, no, you don't know how long I've waited for you. This movie, because I love movies that are bad. So to say that I hate the movies is a lie. I love how horrible the movies are intentionally, and especially this first one. It seems like Catherine Hardwicke understood the material. That's like, okay, we know what this is, but we're not taking it too seriously because it's just about to capture that fun feeling of this, kind of ridiculous situation. And almost immediately, when I saw the second one, I was like, oh my God, they are taking this seriously. So it's a different tone. But I was so excited. After the movie, I like couldn't stop talking about it. I was like, is this for real? Like what? Like is like people like this? And then I went and talked to my friends who were mostly guys. And I was like, oh my God, you have to see this or whatever. And they knew me well enough that it wasn't because I thought it was romantic or that
You
I
were
was
actually into it.
or anything. I was like, no, you have to see it. It's fucking hilarious. And so we all went to go see it, and we took a whole row, and we were like howling through the whole thing, laughing so hard. And then we went back again and again, and we would laugh. And then we saw pretty much all the other movies or experiences where we would go and just laugh and laugh. And we noticed there was other groups of people who did the same thing. There was people who came who were fans, and then there was people who came to see these movies because they were hilarious. So I was definitely in the latter group.
Wow, that's more than understandable, honestly. They're so fun. And I have an interesting history with the film in the sense that I clearly remember when it came out in the cinema, and I didn't go watch it because like it was everywhere. The publicity was in every teenage magazine wherever you turn. It was like, oh, Twilight here, Twilight that, Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, blah blah blah, and every single girl at school had seen this, and not a single guy had. And so it was very much one of those classic cases of, like, boys aren't supposed to be watching this because it's a girl thing. So I never checked it out, and it was always one of those things where it was kind of I would even call it the Titanic of my
Yes.
generation, where it's like all the boys have to hate it even if they haven't watched it, and all the girls have to love it because it's a love story, it's tragic. Oh my god, it's a cliche of just gender dynamics that's ridiculous when you think about it. Um, but I remember a few years ago, it was always on TV as well. I've seen like snippets here and there, but a few years ago, a good friend of mine also listened to the podcast. Ciao Ale, if you're listening to this, probably. Um, she was very much a fan of these films, not in an overly serious way, but she was like, "Oh, they're fun, and they're enjoyable," and she really loves Kristen Stewart. And I was like, you know what? For you, I'll watch it. I'll watch Twilight. I watched the first one, and I watched it, and I had a blast. I didn't think I would enjoy this movie as much as I did, and ended up watching the entire series right after, which was one messed up marathon of just movies to watch and digest. But it was fun. And I think that's kind of key for me with this film, especially when compared to the book, is that there is, I don't know how intentional, honestly, and I'm kind of interested. I think you, Hillary, especially want to hear your thoughts on it, but the way that it's made, it does feel like they're kind of in on the joke. And more than anything, I think the two main actors are kind of in on the joke. Because the main difference, of course, is that you're not hearing, kind of, but you're not hearing Bella's thoughts constantly. You're not fully in her headspace. And so there is something beautiful about this more objective way of experiencing the narrative, where it is incredibly awkward and it is incredibly weird. And I can almost see them, especially in some of the stilted dialogue. I was watching, I was thinking, is this an attempt at recreating how awkward teenage romance can be? Where they're just talking about nothing for 5 minutes? Or they're just like, hey, let's do this thing in chemistry class, and then just a small comment, and then just silence for 15 seconds. Just the two of them just staring at each other in very odd ways. Um, yes, it's a fun film, and I think it kind of goes back to the way that it's put together and the style. So I'm curious, what about the way that Catherine Hardwicke directs this film, and the way that, I don't know, even like how the vampire moves around with wires and this fast moving effect? What's the appeal of it? Why is it so endearing for us all?
I
Who
think it's
wants?
because we've all got brain rot, and being in lockdown for so long kind of rewired our brains, and we thought, oh yeah, this is passable, this is acceptable filmmaking. Some of the shots in this, especially when it's like Edward in the classroom, he's like shaken, he's like really angry. It's genuinely like he is one pout away from it just being like a Zoolander extra. It's incredible. It's like a real straight extreme close up of him just brooding. They are funny, and I do think it's an intentional humor of kind of, that's the romantic comedy genre. Oh, it's love at first sight, and he's just fucking raging. It's brilliant. It's a real. I don't want to say it turns it on its head because that's giving too much credit to the source material, but there's a definite understanding that, I do think they've all read the book and thought, oh, we can't really adapt this. We can't take that seriously. That's just not morally right. So they've done their best to make it kind of funny. Um, I think some of the editing is horrific. Like, I don't know why
Oh,
the
jeez.
opening, especially, the blurring when it's following the deer or whatever it is, the Bambi thing. I don't know what they're called.
The Bambi
Um,
thing. The
what
deer, yes.
I don't know animals. You know about the chicken incident, Nick, and
Very
Carson
true,
as
very
well.
true.
Um, I I don't I don't get what they were thinking, but to be fair, I don't think Maya knew what she was thinking, so it's kind of evened out a bit. I think the color scheme's really weird. It's like focusing on like nature and greenery, and then for the entire film, it's just grey because it's just miserable and raining all the time.
It's the
And then when
rainiest
it's,
place in the US.
yeah, well, that's not my problem, is it? So, Forks, it's called Forks. What a place! I think, yeah, I do think there's an intention behind it of just, trying to be funny, but at the same time, it is oddly enough kickstarting that new generation of mainstream actors, because Kirsten Stewart and Robert Pattinson went on for really, really great success. They have managed to transcend what Rupert Grint and Emma Watson couldn't with the Harry Potter series. Don't shake your head. I know he's doing Knock at the Cabin Woods Door or whatever it's called, that Rupert fella.
I love Rupert.
Evil Dead 3. But both Patterson and Stewart are very good actors. Like that's undeniable. And I do genuinely think they're quite good in this as well, because they know what they need to play up. They know that the fundamentals of their performance are based on absolute nonsense. And they just kind of have fun with it. I think everybody has a bit of fun in this film. It is funny. Like, it really is. And I think out of all of them, Anna Kendrick manages to get away with a performance that doesn't seem like mockery. So it's a good bag overall.
That's Anna Kendrick popping up on screen is always a jump scare. I'm like, oh my god, I forget you're here. It's just like, oh, geez, pitch perfect. What appeals to you, Carson, about this style, Catherine Hardwicke's direction? Just
maybe I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit more than everyone else here, but like, I don't know. Yes, it is hilarious. And I think that's where like it has a smaller budget than the other films. I can respect that you're trying to bring like, especially like, oh, Edward's going to run really fast and it's like fucking hilarious, right? And like the whole, I think the color scheme is iconic. I love the filter. So mad they don't bring it back really for the future films. But like there is this level of campiness and it's fun. It's taking the piss out of itself. Love that. It's entertaining. But like at its core, I think far more than the book, like some of the emotions do genuinely work, right? Like I think Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, say what you want about, like, obviously these are probably not their best performances, but like as soon as they see each other, there's a genuine tension there. Like as soon as they lock eyes, that every time they're on screen together, like, sorry, I was buying it. I was feeling that romantic tension that clearly the book wants to have, but it just cannot have because it's incompetent with writing. Like, I think this is a film that in those visceral moments, I think it works. I think the drama of the vampires, you were mentioning that, Nick, and I'll say quickly, not to like shit on anyone, everyone is valid. If you're mad that fictional creatures are being like portrayed in a different way, I think you really need to go take like a look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, I mean, they don't exist, right? Like, you're not really, can't really do it wrong, grow up. But like,
they're real to me, Carson.
There is that point where like Edward is like talking to Bella, and like the execution's obviously always like, that's the thing, the execution is always laughably bad, kind of. But like he's like, yeah, I was built for killing, and like I don't know, there is like some drama there that does connect. Or when she's in the room and she's like, oh, you don't sleep, and they just have like this silent like 5-second scene where they're just like, it just sits with that. And I think like it's not great made, right? Like Twilight's not an amazing film. It's not a masterpiece, not a, you know, award contender, I would say. But like it does mix that campiness of execution that is charming and innocent enough with like the genuinely deeper, kind of stronger emotions that the book is trying to go through with its ideas. And like it just does work for me. Like, I don't know, I'm here for it.
Yeah, there's this scene that's emblematic for me of the entire movie, and it is the first, not the first time that they see each other, but when Bella enters the chemistry science lab, and that moment just encapsulates what makes this film so enjoyable, in a way that, again, like I can see them making it thinking this was going to be amazing, and it does backfire, but it also turns her back around to actually work, which is when Bella just enters the classroom. There is this giant fan just aimed at the door and aimed at her entering, and she walks past it, and there's just this breeze of just the hair flowing in the wind, and Robert Pattinson on the other side of the room just kind of covering his mouth, like I don't even know how to describe it without getting overly sexual, but you know, it's this very like, oh my god, just very upset. It's like this slow zoom in on his face. Like, what's happening here? It's great. I'm watching it and thinking, that's cinema. You know, they sit down and behind Robert Pattinson, there's this owl with the great wings, but it looks like he's an angel. It's like, it's amazing. It's a bird of prey, you know, but also it's angelic, it's majestic. That's symbolism, you know. There's hard work behind the set design. That's incredibly fun, incredibly endearing to me. I'm just watching it thinking, you can tell that they actually spent time figuring out, you know, some of those little details that are ridiculous, but they're also very fun. And speaking of the central performances, I'm curious to know how you feel that they kind of improve upon the characters in the book. because I completely agree on that point that the characters, the way that they're portrayed in the film, it is slightly slightly more likable than in the book. I'm curious, Hillary, how you feel about the performances and how they kind of enhance and embody Bella and Edward, and even all the others. Like, if anyone is interesting characters they want to talk about, or
Oh
any
yeah, yeah,
weird
of course.
moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say one of the things that's interesting about the book, and I mean, not so much in the movies because I think the movies do a better job, is that the characters that are kind of sidelined, especially the vampires, they have way more interesting backstories
Hmm.
than what is going on in the main story. You know, particularly like Carlisle's story is insane. Rosalie's story is insane. Even Alice, everyone, these other vampires. But as far as the performances are concerned, I mean, because I've done such a deep dive on these films over the years, is that Kristen Stewart took everything seriously. She will defend the book. She'll defend the character. She was very, very serious about playing every single thing as close to the book as possible. And then you have Robert Pattinson, who hated the books, hated the movies, hated his character, hated playing him, but was very, very good at it. And I think I didn't understand how good he was until I read the books because he really had the
Hmm.
mannerisms down, um, and the pauses, and making his mouth a hard line, balling his fists, furrowing his brow. Everything that Meyer wrote, he was able to replicate very well. But he hated it, and I have a quote here when they interviewed him. I think it was after the first one. He says, "When you read the book, it's like Edward Cullen was so beautiful I creamed myself. I mean, every line is like that. He's the most ridiculous person who's so amazing at everything. I think a lot of actors tried to play that aspect, talking about auditions. I just couldn't do that. And the more I read the script, the more I hated this guy. So that's how I played him, as a manic depressive who hates himself. Plus, he's a 108-year-old virgin, so he's obviously got some issues there. He his commentaries on the Twilight DVD and the Eclipse DVD are some of the most hilarious things I've ever heard. He's just like spitting out. He's just like, this relationship's dumb. It's stupid. Blah blah blah. I don't want to spoil any of that because it's amazing, but he did a
So
great
much
job.
contempt.
Yes, he hates it. I think like he was on a late night talk show and they said, "Isn't it sad that this is over?" And he just started like laughing maniacally. And he was like, "For them." Referring to the fans, he was so fucking happy to be done doing those movies. So,
Bless
um,
him.
but I mean, aside from that, I mean, there's a lot of different performances in the film that help it hold together. I think the portrayal of like the actual kids she goes to school with is great. Like they're always like in this dark, brooding romance, but the more you watch the film, the more you realize like everyone is having fun around them, like Eric and Mike and Jessica. It's just really, really silly. But I have to point out Charlie. Charlie is my favorite character in the films. I love
Yes.
Charlie. In the books, he's terrible, very terrible.
It's
He's like
non-existent in as well.
he merges more in the later books, but he's like an angry, pissy, insensitive guy. But
Oh.
the casting of Billy Burke, and I think eventually I don't know if they caught on anything, but in the later movies, it's like they give him more lines where like everything is like at the wedding, he's like everything's really sappy and he's like, well, I'm gonna go get drunk because he just can't take anymore. He's like voicing the audience what they're thinking, the people who don't want to be there. Um and he's just a great character overall. It's always heartbreaking to watch the scene where she is in the house and tells him, I'm just gonna be stuck here like mom. It's just the first time I saw it, that was like the only part I was like, that was really devastating for you to say that to a parent, and it was so unnecessary as well. There's so many plot holes of like how they could have handled that situation other than going to the house and I don't know, just being shitty. And she's shitty to him like throughout the series, like I'm gonna run away, I'm gonna go do this or whatever, and your friends are dying, I don't care, bye. So yeah, he's definitely my favorite. To me, that's an iconic performance. Charlie all the way.
Yeah. Billy Burke, hats off, well deserved. I also really love him. Yeah, it's that scene especially. It's one of those moments where kind of everything comes together very well, and even Kristen Stewart's performance. I do appreciate what she was going for. You can tell she took it very seriously, but uh, that's one of the few dramatic beats that actually works. It actually hits
Yeah,
you. Even from the
After all,
book as
it's
well.
the same director as 13, so I think that scene worked because she had done stuff like that before, teenagers being terrible to their parents and hurting them. Very good at that.
It is interesting that they picked Catherine Hardwicke for this. Maybe because of 14, most likely. They're like,
Yeah.
it's coming of age, complex coming of age drama. So like,
And the blue, I think the blue filter was in Lords of Dogtown as well. So she's like, I'll just put the turquoise filter on everything. And that makes it very special. Yes, it makes it, that's what part of what makes it so visually memorable, is that it's so blue.
It's so much late 2000, just screams it. Those were the days of just desaturated, bluish looking movies. And then the sequels are all orangey, brownish.
I'm sorry, but wouldn't we
Especially-
take that over like whatever generic shit Marvel's putting out? Like, I'm sorry, this has like identity. It has a visual, like, I wouldn't say visual soul. Maybe I don't know if there's a ton of depth there. Like, oh, it's sad and cold and rainy, but like, it really is. Like, this is what cinema is missing: is iconic choices of style like this. Like, truly, like, you know. And I'm not saying Twilight's the best that's ever done this, but like, I watch this and I'm like so sad that I watched just like 40 films at Sundance and not a single one had a visual style like this. Like, truly, it's depressing that cinema is now just like, and it's still, you know, culture overall, right? But like, we're just ridding style, and it's like, no, style is so fun. It's so good.
It's true.
Was Twilight the last good movie? I mean, the correlation between Twilight releasing and Iron Man releasing in the same year, it does add up. But I do agree, like, completely with what Carson just said there. I think at the very least, Twilight is doing the best of a bad situation, adapting a really terrible book, and it gets something all right out of it. It's essentially what Luca Guadagnino did with Bones and all. But it's on another layer to that, they actually feel like characters, like people, like there feels like there's depth to the world that they're living in, rather than just, oh well, I could learn more about the city. I guess I'll watch the other 2.5-hour thing that comes out in 3 months exclusively on Disney Plus, which I can subscribe to. It's locking away content, and Twilight doesn't feel like content, even though it is fundamentally like, you know, you could get these books for a penny in a charity shop. And there's that many of them, it's mass produced, but this is a mass production of, there's genuine love behind it. You know, I know Stephenie Meyer is not a good writer, you know. I remember doing a bit of research on her, and she said her influences are Jane Austen and William Shakespeare, which screams of, I've been asked a question at a book launch and I panicked. Because the closest she gets to implementing those influences is mentioning them by name, which is great. But I do think there is a genuine sort of, at a fundamental level, like it or not, there is an emotive core to Twilight that actually kind of, it doesn't quite work, but it's there, and it's just kind of appreciating the effort of trying to make something out of it. Whereas you've got something like Marvel where it's checking boxes until it's finished.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, that's kind of what it became. I mean, Catherine Hardwicke wanted to direct the other films that came afterwards, but she asked for a little bit too much of a turnaround time, and they wanted to get it out right away. So all the other movies were done by male directors. And I mean, of course, I don't know the exact reasons that happened, but there's a lot to infer from that situation. Here was someone who made a very fun, hilarious, intentionally or not, film about vampire romance and seemed to know the tone. And almost immediately, although there's things I like about the sequels, like I could talk about the cinematography in the second one, or the soundtrack, songs they used in the film or score, production design, all that stuff. It's quite wonderful, but it almost immediately, like I said, it started taking itself seriously, and it's like, oh, they're actually glorifying this really unhealthy, messed up relationship. There's just so many things that are wrong with it. No matter how hard they try to rectify things with acting or rewriting certain things, it's just baldly there, like right in your face. So it's just a shame, because it did become a franchise and checking the boxes in a way, but they still had fun with it too, especially the last one. The last one like completely changed the fourth book, and I'm really grateful for that in some ways.
The beauty of the unhinged battle at the end of Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2 is special.
People think that's in the book. It's not in the book. It's just a bunch of people staring at each other in a snowy field. Nothing happens.
That's
They had to
very.
make something happen. Michael Sheen's being cast. You can't have that man doing nothing.
Exactly. So they had to write that, and
I'm still stunned that the guy that directed the last two is the guy that directed the Beauty and the Beast remake.
Bill Condon, yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
Bill Condon,
Whew.
which is what a
very
career.
strange.
What a career. Really cementing his legacy.
Well, as far as that
Certainly.
battle scene is concerned, yes, it is. That to me is a legacy. That was the only time I watched anything in the theaters that had to do that movie, and my heart started pounding. I'm like, oh, this is so fucking good. Everyone's getting decapitated and curb stomped and thrown into. Yeah, Rami Malek punches the ground, and it immediately opens into like a volcanic chasm, and people are falling in. I told people like that's the reason he won the Oscar. It's not because of Bohemian Rhapsody. It's because he punched the ground in the Twilight movie so hard, people like started falling into a hole. It was just so silly.
The baseball scene's also pretty epic, though.
Oh,
Like,
people love that.
gotta
Especially
say,
Swan.
that's awesome.
Somebody did a music video that recreated it recently, but I don't know who the artist was. But it had the same like filter and everything, and everyone was cosplaying as the Cullens. It was really silly,
There,
but
yeah,
nostalgic at the same time.
there's just something about Ashley Green, the way she just throws the ball, just kind of like pulling her leg up, like so high up every time,
Yeah,
just charging up. And they're just slamming into each other. It's amazing. Again, it's cinema. It's cinema. I think the other moment that makes me squeal whenever I watch the movie is when the Bella's Lullaby, the Carter Burwell, Oscar nominated, not yet winning, unfortunately, but one of my all-time favorite composers. Is the main theme starts playing, and it's just uh, Edward climbing the tree, and it's going to the rhythm of the music, and then it cuts to him playing the actual theme on the piano, like in this darkly lit room. It's like, oh my god, this
we
is
don't know what
amazing.
room it is. That's the thing.
I
It's like,
don't
where
know
are they? We don't know where they
they're in a
are.
castle. I don't know. It's dark, but I don't know. It's so weird. There's all those baffling choices in here that kind of work. It's interesting, and I do still think that the main problem of just how problematic the central relationship between Edward and Bella is stands in the film. I don't know how you three feel about that. Sorry, but that was especially the roughest thing about the book that really bothered me, because that's, I think, kind of the last big thing I want to talk about is just what did this teach to teenagers when it came
Ooh,
out? Because
ooh,
I
ooh.
remember when I had, like, it was I, I think you said it, Ewan. Like Tim Edward, Tim Jacob. This was before the Twitter, and before it was actually a thing you would do online. You would actually do it with people in real life. And I do remember just every day waiting to go into school. Outside of it, the girls just team up whenever a new Twilight movie would come out, and they would argue about it and discuss it, and like, oh, should have been him because of that, should have been that because of it, blah blah blah. All those very very heated conversations, and that always kind of fascinated me, especially because it was like, how can you be how can you take it this seriously, like to the point of almost like breaking friendships if you were part of the other team? How can you feel about that? And there's this one passage that really bothered me and kind of made me rethink a lot of the teenage relationships that some of my classmates had, that were very, to call them problematic is an understatement. But there's this passage in the book where Edward does some very creepy shit, as he usually does, and Bella says something along the lines of, I would have been creeped out and very upset, but he's just looking me in the face, and he's so beautiful. He's like a Greek god, and it's just I cannot not love him. And that's just the problem for me of the relationship. It relies entirely on the physical aspects of Edward. He's not
Mhm.
smart, he's not intelligent. Bella constantly refers to his beauty, to his beautiful face, to his sculpted body, to justify stalkery behavior and gaslighting. And bro, Hillary, you have things to say. It's
Yes,
just
I went ooh ooh earlier, but I mean the reason why is because first of all, a lot of people did read this as kids or as teenagers, and they are coming forward now saying that the book did have actual repercussions on their romantic lives. They ended up dating
mm,
people like Edward. They were looking for that, and I know that in some ways it's real because there was someone I knew who really was obsessed with Wuthering Heights when she was a kid. And so she kept trying to find Heathcliff. Heathcliff was not the kind of boyfriend that people should be looking for. And she found Heathcliff over and over again.
Ouch.
So first of all, there were actual repercussions from these books and these movies where people took things seriously and ended up in abusive relationships, which is really sad. But overall, I mean, that's exactly the problem I had with this. There was a real hatred for this series because people thought, oh, it's just people hating on what girls are into. And that wasn't my issue. My main issue is that what made me hate it is that it was an incredibly unhealthy, disturbing, fucked up relationship that was, basically based on horniness, obsession, and arguing. Like in the book, they argue all the time. In the movie, they don't so much. It seems like they're actually spending time together and like being around each other, but they're always arguing and disagreeing and putting each other down. And I really don't like that personally, but I also think it's a horrible thing to model to the audience that the book is written for. See, I wrote a list down of like things that are considered hot in this book. I'll say like being rude and arguing is hot, stalking her is hot, sneaking into her house and watching her sleep without consent is hot, mocking her is hot, putting her down is hot, playing mind games with her is hot, admitting he has seen corpses to her is hot, threatening to kill her is hot, manipulating and pressuring her is hot, physically pushing and pulling her around is hot, bossing her around is hot, commanding, ordering, telling her when to eat and drink is hot. All of this is based on his attractiveness. And that's the same issue I had with 50 Shades of Grey, is that there's a female character who's like, you can do whatever you want to me because you're hot. And that just doesn't cut it for me. It doesn't. And especially, I mean, and this is me thinking about this as an adult. I learned this younger when I was a teenager, so it wasn't an issue. But I saw people around me who were falling for this. And it's sad to hear about people who actually got hurt because they were like, oh, I want someone to pull my sleeve and jerk me around and like refuse to let me drive my car and control everything because it reminds me of Edward. But it's not a healthy relationship. That's my main issue here. So that's my say on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that as well, I think it's kind of a lot of, especially the movie. I think the movie, because it has such a quicker pace to it, it is just Belle getting gaslit into believing somebody is not a vampire. Where it's like, you know what I am saying, a vampire. I didn't say that. It's just
no one's gonna believe you.
Yeah, I didn't say that. It's just so silly. And it's like Hillary's just put there. I mean, that's spot on. It really does kind of appropriate and sort of discuss something that shouldn't be accepted, and it makes it very popular, and it makes it something that boils down to, am I on the side of the sparkly werewolf or the sparkly vampire? I don't actually know if Taylor Lautner sparkles in the sequels. I could be wrong. I've only seen the first film.
He doesn't sparkle. It's not a big spoiler.
Well, that's killed off all the interest I've got in the future films in the franchise, to be honest.
Actually, I have a fun anecdote about that, because I met the makeup artist who did the makeup for Twilight at a dinner party. Whoa. I didn't know this until she started talking about it. She ended up, oh no, she didn't do it for Twilight. No, she did Robert Pattinson's makeup for Damsel. And she was telling a story about how she was doing makeup for him, and she asked, I have to ask you a question. And he said, what? And he said, it's about Twilight. And he was like, oh my God, here we go. And she's like, no. She's like, they made you sparkle? And she's like, how did they do that? And then the first movie, he's like, they smeared glitter glue all over me, which was incredibly painful to remove or get off. It was because the movie was so cheap. And she said, oh my God, that's so horrible. I'm sorry that happened. He said, well, that makeup artist didn't make it to the second one because they started using CG instead. But the first one, yeah, I guess they actually like put glue all over him or something. Needless to say, yeah, there's none of that in the other movies. But anyway.
Fair enough, though. You can get a kilogram of ultra sparkle glitter multi-purpose for £7. So I think I know what I'm going as for Halloween.
Be careful if you have stubble. Like if you put on your face, it's probably not. And he's really stubbly, apparently. So
best not get the chunky ultra sparkle glitter. Might have to go for the ultra fine.
Yes.
This one looks light blue.
Perfect. It has the turquoise filter already.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, I'm getting 5 bags.
for the whole group of friends. You can go together as the Collins.
Oh no,
Mm.
just for me, I'm gonna bathe in it, and then I'm gonna hit the town as a vampire. Already
What a
got the
way to
coat for
stand
it.
out at Venice this year. I mean,
Oh,
show your love for
melt to go.
cinema. I think it'll all work out.
This
I
is
don't
cinema.
think-
This is cinema. Look at me. Twilight is cinema. It's like,
I don't
remove this
think the
man,
people
please.
of Venice and or Italy, or those attending the festival, really want to see me coated in 5 kilograms of Hemway Premium Ultra Sparkle Glitter, clutching a Campari in one hand, yelling about how he wishes Brendan Fraser was here still.
It's a new icon.
Wrong
right
audience,
there.
but someone wants to see that. Someone does. Just not those people, and they don't understand you, so their loss.
Oh,
Thank you,
That's-
Ewan, for dropping that link in case any of us wanted
Hey,
to get
no
our own.
problem.
I'll
I
definitely
like to
be looking at it.
inspire. You can get all sorts of colours. It's amazing. You can get ocean blue holographic. I think that might be the colour for me.
It sounds beautiful.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Once it's
That's
like out of
fantastic.
context, but it's probably as horrible in real life.
It looks like what a dolphin would sneeze.
what the-
Oh wow, that's
A
pretty
vampire
cool.
dolphin? They do kind of sparkle sometimes.
I wonder if
Yeah.
there are like vampire animals, because I know there's werewolves in
Mhm.
Twilight, but they never really establish whether or not there's kind of like, vampire werewolves. There's no real, I know there's a weird bit at the end where Taylor Lautner's character starts dating the daughter of Belle and Edward.
Yeah.
I know that, and it's like I'm pretty sure that's accurate, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but
Yes.
it's creepier than that.
Yeah, there's a 14-year age gap there. Or
Oh
at
no,
least.
no, it's
Why there?
it's just bizarre. That's almost another podcast.
Yeah, it's a shame that Taylor Lautner's character didn't actually live in dog years, because he'd be dead by then. But you win
It's
some,
true.
you lose some, I suppose.
Unless he cuts his hair, that's a plus.
Yeah.
There was also another thing that really bothered me about the book. First of all, you can kind of tell that when Stephenie Meyer wrote the book, she didn't really care about Jacob. She probably wanted to add the werewolf element, but she doesn't really focus on it in any way. So it's almost like a afterthought, just a side character to get some more exposition and to push Bella in the right direction. But in the film, you can tell they wanted to we know where this is going. It's going to be a werewolf, so they gave him a beefier role. But one thing that really troubled me about the character of Bella is that she actually thinks in the book, she's like, oh, okay, I can tell this guy is kind of into me. I'm going to use that to my advantage. I'm going to manipulate him to get more information out of him, start flirting with him. Like, she actually thinks that. I'm like, oh my, gee, this cannot be real. Like, I cannot actually be reading a protagonist who's supposed to be someone I like. Because if this were, I don't know, like American Psycho, perfectly fine, we've just talked about Train Spotting in the last episode, and those are not likable characters, but neither are they meant to be. And instead, I'm here just reading Bella manipulate her way to true love, I guess.
Yeah, I hated that scene too. The way they portrayed it in the film, it's more natural. Where she's like, "Hey, like I heard it. Like the guy said something over there. Like, are they banned from here?" Like she actually seems like it. She just wants
Actually interested.
information, and she's not really flirting with him or anything. Really, not
Mhm.
overtly. But I mean,
They were
there's some
childhood friends as well. That's
yeah,
added
kind
from
of.
the book.
Yeah. But I mean, she's more manipulative and kind of awful than I remember reading the book again. I mean, like I wrote some notes here. It's like when she doesn't get her way, like she talks about this. She's like, when I don't get my way, like it was silent treatment and pouting. And then she casually brings up near the beginning of the book that she would throw tantrums to get her way as a kid. Things like that. It was just and then also like the way she thinks about her father, like spending time with Billy and her father's like some sort of unnecessary painful thing. And it's like they just want to spend time with you. Like, why are you so terrible? Why are you such a terrible person? Why? And why am I stuck in your mind?
She gives a bad name to antisocial people.
Ooh, yeah,
Uh,
that's one way of putting it.
um, just to kind of start to tie everything to a close. I don't know if there's anything more specific that all of you want to talk about. In which case, feel free to just go into it. But I'm generally curious to know what you think is the legacy of Twilight. Twilight as a book and as a film. We're in the year 2023. We are 50 years apart from when the movie came out, and almost 20 years removed from the release of the book. Like the book is of age right now; it's 18 years old, which is it's starting to make me feel old. But what do you all think is the legacy of Twilight? I see you, Ewan, are carefully inspecting the coffee, hoping for answers.
Sorry, I've just read a quote from a Times review.
Oh, what did it
Her,
say?
her story, recounted in hypnotic, dreamy prose, encapsulates perfectly the teenage feeling of sexual tension and alienation. And I suppose the more you think on that quote, the more the legacy of Twilight comes clear. It's managed to manipulate an entire generation of people into thinking that this is right.
And critics
Um,
too.
but to be fair, this is the sort of writing you get when you've had too many wine spritzers and don't really know what you're doing. That's there is a charm to it. There is a reason it's successful, and it's because I think the more people are presented more things, the less time they've got to engage with things, and sometimes it's just nice to have a bit of a light read. And Twilight is a light read. I mean, like it or not, like however remarkable or unremarkable it is as a book, it's very unremarkable. But it's the ease of access that people can have to it, and it's how quick it kind of is to read it, and it's a lot of that comes from just word of mouth. I do believe that a lot of the love and the legacy of Twilight depends solely on people that are nostalgic for it now. But I don't doubt that there's people that are now coming of age that are going back and reading Twilight because it's still got a presence. It's still got that Harry Potter element. I think a lot of the fantasy elements keep it lifted as well. Where it's, vampires are always popular, and considering the post Twilight slate of vampire movies and how awful some of those were, I'm not surprised Twilight's kind of like the high point of the late 20s, the late 2000s even, of like vampire content. It doesn't puzzle me as much as I thought it would, but I do think Twilight has a legacy to it that is at the same level as it's a generational thing for people like Harry Potter and Hunger Games. But at the same time, it's kind of elevated beyond that because there are, I don't know, it is it both taking the piss out of Blade and also every other rom com. It's Blade meets The Notebook, and there's a clear market for that. I mean, the film's made $3.4 billion. Let's not forget that. $3.4 billion. That's more money than I will ever see. Probably
yes.
unless I sell my kidneys. It's mad. I think the legacy is that it's kind of just got a legacy. I don't know how it's happened. I don't think anybody will ever know how it happened. Some things just happen, Justin Timberlake was popular for a good period of time, Real Big Fish used to have best-selling albums. These things happen, and there's no way of explaining it. Ska music used to be a thing, Some things just kind of pass, and some things will remain. It's kind of like, you've got the Beatles, you've got David Bowie, you've got Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. I don't agree that all of those things are worth a legacy, but they certainly have one.
I agree.
It's
The
kind of
Beatles
hard
are
to escape.
overrated.
Yeah. What did they do apart from
Yeah.
Abbey Road? Yeah.
Bait. Hillary, how about you? Your thoughts?
I mean, as far as my feelings on the Beatles, well, I mean, I wouldn't say that they're overrated. I think that they've been so overexposed where it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, they're pretty good, but it's been so overplayed it doesn't mean anything. But as far as Twilight is concerned, I don't know where it's going to go as far as a legacy, because it all depends on whether it continues to mean something to people generation to generation. And it does seem like we are at a time where aspects of relationships between men and women, or just people in general, are drastically changing. So I don't think that this is probably going to be viewed as the perfect romance it was. I definitely hope not. But there's still there's still joy to be found in how awful it is. But yeah, I think I only have like 3 points left here because I didn't write down these talking points.
I'll go for it.
The one thing that I do want to bring up, and this is just like a tiny side road, is that Stephenie Meyer is Mormon, and I was raised Mormon. So there are things in these books that I understand that I think the average reader doesn't, just like how twisted and strange some of her writing choices and the way she perceives gender roles or relationships is, because it's a very sexually repressed patriarchal society, especially when you have a bunch of Mormons living together, i.e., Utah. So the Lamb of the Lion speech is from an LDS hymn. It is also from the Bible, but there's this line that probably Stephenie Meyer would sing in church all the time, where it's like, "How blessed the day when the lamb and the lion shall lie down together without any ire." And I was just like, she probably got that from the hymn. Edward's chest, his muscular chest. Joseph Smith, the head of LDS Church, had an angel appear to him allegedly in a room in the middle of the night, and he wrote extensively about his perfectly muscled chest. That ended up in Twilight as well, which is really strange. And of course, the Native American racism, which is vastly cataloged on all over the internet as far as Mormon relations with Native American people. I find it a little more than coincidental that Jacob and his family are called the Blacks because the dark people are called Lamanites in the Book of Mormon. And of course, the white people are not going to end up with Native Americans because they are marked, they have the mark of Cain or whatever. But aside from that, it's super nostalgic. Sometimes I have nostalgia for the movies just because of the experience of going with my friends and some of the aesthetics, the visuals of it, the music, and things like that. The Twilight Renaissance is real. It's definitely all over the place. And the thing I appreciate the most about the legacy is that these young fans are growing up, they're becoming adults, and they're catching up to the way I felt about it from the very beginning. We were like, this is unhealthy, it's fucking stupid, it's gross, and Charlie is the best character. And the fan fiction community is booming. They're just basically rewriting the whole thing. What if all the characters were queer? What if Rosalie was Indian? All these certain things, changing the races and making the relationships healthier and writing them over themselves. They're taking the template she started with. That has a lot of promise, and they're just rewriting everything. And I think that's wonderful. If anything, I hope that's legacy. Taking something unhealthy and turning it into something special, even if it's just among, a small niche fandom.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. That's kind of the power of fan fiction, I think, as well. It can be used for good, actual good, especially if it, makes the fans feel better about the entertainment and media and art that they grew up with and consumed. If they can grow alongside it instead of being stuck in the past. I don't know if anyone here has read the book from the perspective of Edward. That's a thing, right?
I
Yeah.
did. I
You
did.
did?
I read the leak in 2008 to get ready for the movie, and it's incredibly disturbing. Very disturbing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's
They did that for 50 Shades of Grey. With
Yeah.
They're still doing it.
great.
They're still doing it.
I believe
Oh
they're
wow,
still
that is
releasing them.
that is a fucking
It's the whole
2-decade
trilogy.
grift. That's brilliant. Well done. E.L. James really just swiping the money out of people's pockets.
We
Pulling the
stand
belt
for a
straps on
reason.
that one is fucking
People keep
Jesus.
buying them. That's how it works.
Again, I mean, Twilight's kind of got the same legacy as 50 Shades of Grey, hasn't it? Where it's inexplainable how it became so popular, but it's just there. It's a thing that happened. Whether maybe it's because there was just a lack of anything else going on at the time, and it got popular through sort of no other alternative. That's grim to think.
I don't know. I don't have an explanation for it myself, but it is popular for. I guess you'd have to ask someone who unapologetically loves it, like really, really deep down, like why they love it so much.
I had I don't know. I had an acquaintance, let's say, who grew up reading the books and watching the movies, and she loves them almost in a fanatical, religious way. Um, and she made, I remember because she sent it to me, she was like, oh, I want to know your opinions about this. I want to know your opinions about this. I wrote about why Belle is a misunderstood protagonist. And it was, I'm not joking, like over 20 Instagram stories of just thick text defending the character of Bella. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation, which is you see yourself in these characters. And I can see, I like, especially having known a lot of people who kind of like Twilight, and especially this girl as well. I think like, man, like it says a lot about loneliness, and I do think about all of the people who don't feel seen in the world. It's a crying shame that the only example present in popular media to kind of latch onto was like, oh yes, Bella, she's lonely, she's sad, she's depressed. The only thing she's lacking is like suicidal tendencies. That's literally it, because otherwise she'd be like a perfect portrayal of depression in that sense. And the whole idea of, there's this Edward, this vampire, and I can turn him good, I can make him good, I'm not afraid of him because I love him so much, and my love trumps all of the evil things he could do. There is something I would say there's something tragic about it. And seeing someone so passionately defend the book and understanding what it means to them, I want to say kind of moved me. It also made me a bit more worried about their mental health. No, not even as a joke, just seriously. I'm like, are you okay? I'm like, honestly, you want to talk about this? Because it's an interesting fight to fight, the one of defending Twilight, and especially the writing of Twilight. Because just for me, the legacy of this in terms of just pop culture, it's because of Twilight we had so much garbage. Like, what if monster but romance for young adults? Which
Oh
is
yeah,
thankfully it's over with, thank God. We had the zombies, we have the mermaids, we had everything, aliens.
fairies, angels. I saw like various books in people's houses, and I would read them. I was like, oh, it's another supernatural romance. So it boomed for a while.
It's, yeah, everyone wanted their own Twilight. um but I do think it's interesting what you were talking about as well, Hillary, of just the romantic legacy of how it's impacted people's relationship. And I think that's why I do consider, even though 50 Shades has created a lot of problems, I do think it's more a matter of how people consumed these pieces of entertainment. Because I do think Twilight is made earnestly as a way of, as a positive way. That's what I find disturbing about the relationship. It's, you do feel that she's thinking that this is good, this is nice, this is the way it should be, which is messed up. But I'm reading something like 50 Shades, and we had fun talking about it last year.
Hmm.
And it reads like a fantasy. And that's kind of what surprised me about Twilight. It doesn't read like a fantasy. And if people take the relationship between, I don't even remember the character's name, Anastasia Steele and Christian Grey, there you go. If you take their relationship seriously, I would say it's more on the reader than the actual writer, because it's erotic, it's a fantasy, it's pure fantasy. But then it becomes so much bigger than what it was meant to be, and that's ultimately what I think the legacy of Twilight is. It became so much bigger than it was ever meant to be. uh, and it's fascinating that you have people, yes, feeling nostalgic, going to the anniversary screenings.
Jack
uh,
did. Jack literally
Jack
did like a
did.
road trip to Washington to go to Folks or wherever they filmed it. Like, I don't think you guys understand how in Jack is in the Twilight fandom.
It's amazing. It's
That's pretty
um,
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, I just think
You
like
go,
it
Carson. Yeah.
is it is a foundational text. Like whether you want, I don't think like, I think your point is really interesting, Nick, about how big it got, because I don't think we've really dealt with that, because now we're in the state where Twilight's like a meme, right? But I feel like in 10 years and 15 years, whenever a text or a piece of media or a piece of art is foundational, it says deeper things about the society at the time. I think this is going to be a book, and I think it's rather dead right now. I actually work in a high school. I don't hear
Oh,
anyone talk about Twilight in the slightest. I think like they don't know what it even really is about. I think they know the presence of it. But I think like in
what's
10
the
to
new hot
15
thing right
years,
now? I'm curious.
oh
What's in
god,
for the
it's
kids?
literally it's the Netflix Dahmer show. Like it's weird. It got weird, everyone.
Gross. See,
In
that
Um
high
makes me
school?
mad too.
yeah.
Fuck
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah.
Gross.
I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just stating what I see. But like, I think that Twilight says so much about society, and I think I cannot wait for us to reanalyze it and get past the point where it's like, lol, it's a meme, and really be able to engage with it. I also want to clarify, I actually do have a deeper connection with Twilight. I learned I did speak wrong that I said it was not an awards contender at the 2009 Teen Choice Awards, which I was at live. It did win 9 awards. So I was there and I saw them win a bunch of awards. This podcast brought back repressed memories of me watching Twilight win Best Drama Film. Kristen Stewart won, Robert Pattinson won, a historic evening. So I will say, clarify, it is an awards contender because it did win.
Wow. No, that was the one that was
Twilight
hosted
sweep.
by Andy Samberg,
Jonas
right? Wasn't Andy
Jonas
Samberg the host?
Brothers.
Oh, the Jonas Brothers. Okay, I know that I saw the one with Andy Samberg hosting. He's like, I'm doing this as a bet, and he just like said Twilight into the microphone, and like the entire stadium exploded. And he's like, I just won my bet.
Love that.
And there's so many like obsessed teenagers there. But I have to point out, it is interesting that what teenagers are into now is still a guy who like wants to eat people and murders people. Like there's a parallel there. So I don't know. Maybe being a teenager is just way more murder obsessed than I remember it being. I've just never really been to murderers.
I also think though with streaming, it's concerning that kids now have just access to like all of Netflix. And like beforehand, I feel like if you're watching like, Mom, can I go see the movie about the guy who murders people? That's one thing, but now they just have like unlimited access. I don't know, it's very concerning. I think there would be a great like podcast slash essay series slash something going through like the history of what spoke to teens from like Twilight to now. And I think it's a very like disturbing pathway, but like that's okay, right?
Well, another reason why I think these kids might not be talking about it. I mean, I have nieces, and their mother and their grandmother was obsessed with Twilight, and so I think there's a pushback. Like, well, my mom's into it. I don't want to be into that. Could be that.
That is the perception that it's old. Like people really do. Like kids today look at Twilight. They were born what, high schoolers in like 2008, 2009 now. Like they do look at it and they say, "Oh, that's something old." Like it's not
it
like
is
a
old
new thing.
then, yeah. True.
That just sounds wrong. Well, yeah, high schoolers were born in 2009.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, my nieces were born in 2009, the year that New Moon came out. And now
that's
they're 13.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's I remember those something that stuck with me Twilight related was that I had one side of the family incredibly religious, and the rebellious act of my cousin was to go watch New Moon in the cinema and just fighting to go see it, which retroactively seems silly. But it
and
was.
Weird.
I think you said it as well, maybe Hillary or you,
Yeah.
Carson. That like growing up, it's like you wouldn't go watch the Twilight movie. That's like, it does feel like something. It's against God. it's wrong.
The strange thing is that it's like it's stealth religious propaganda. That's what makes these stories so strange to me. It's like it's abstinence porn. That's what it was called back then, abstinence porn. Where it's just like it's so erotic that they don't have sex, but they really want to do that, and it's very.
Save
it was
it for
such a weird
marriage.
time. Yeah, save it for marriage so he can have such rough sex with you. You're covered with bruises, but you love it. I mean.
And she's instantly pregnant as well, because that's the
and
main role
pregnant.
of everything.
Yeah, and then it just becomes a big abortion issue thing.
Oh,
that was weird too.
Ooh, you're right. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's actually a very disturbing way of looking at it. I never even considered it.
Yeah. I mean, it's very pro-life because Mormons are very pro-life, but it is a situation where it's like, oh, it's so extreme. Really? This is the situation you want to have the argument about. So
I was thinking, even reading the book and thinking about the Mormon angle, the whole way that the Cullen family is portrayed, that everyone who's outside it sees them as weird, and it's borderline incestuous, but it's legal what they're doing. But then when you actually get to meet them, they're so nice, they're so cool.
And they'll meet you for 2 hours, and they'll immediately decide, like, I would die for this teenager I just met like 2 hours ago.
That's the funniest thing. She's family now. No, she isn't. She's the one we called girlfriend. She's not family.
I mean, Rosalie's mean about it, but I'm like, Rosalie's kind of right. She's like, what is she to me? I just met her like 2 hours ago. Like, we're supposed to like get torn apart by some random people just because.
Rosalie gets it.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, she's mean about it, but she has a point.
I think that's the main problem I have with Twilight, and I've only just remembered it, is that there is no line of dialogue or sort of inherent link between Edward Cullen going from not trusting Belle to just trusting her. It just happens, and it never really makes much sense.
They're in love, Ewan.
No, they're not. they're just not. I refuse to accept you can fall in love in a place called Forks.
Forks.
Nothing good.
Which she's never been to. She looked it up on the internet. She looked up La Push, all those places. She's never been in there. She's never been there. She didn't know anything about them. She just took the Quaalude tribe and completely fucked up their entire thing. I mean, these are actual native people, and now people think they're werewolves and stuff. It's insane.
That's ridiculous. That's so horrible.
This is awful. The legacy of Twilight is wine mums now think werewolves are real.
Yeah. I mean, it was coincidentally enough, I moved to Portland and I didn't know it was shot there, so I ended up working and
Ah,
living like right by the school where they shot everything, and the Cullen house was like right there. People used to take their significant others and propose in front of the Cullen house, which I bet the people love there. Love that.
It's like the
Um,
Breaking Bad house.
yeah, it's well, I'm assuming it's a little bit more tucked away. You have to hike to get there, of course, but like people would just, I'm sure, like trespass all the time. There was one place I tried to work, and then I realized it was where the prom sequence was shot at the end, and I was like, I can't work there because all the Twihards are still stalking around there and having Twilight events. I was like, I can't work there. It's just going to be too much.
I think that's the real legacy of Twilight. It's made the actual people that live in Forks and Portland miserable.
Yeah, part of it. Yeah, it's strange. Like without trying, I mean, I've there was like a friend of a friend was in it. He played the original Sam in Twilight. I never met him, but he was a friend of my roommate's.
ah,
It was just crazy. And I think some of my friends were extras in it and stuff because they were all teenage girls and they were obsessed with it at the time too. So it's a small world.
that's so cool. Yeah, cinematic tourism. It's weird.
Hmm.
I know when they were. I remember when they were shooting the second one, New Moon. They shot in Italy as well. Everything with the Volturi in Volterra. Um, and that place ended up having like a bunch of Twilight memorabilia shops. And when we went in like 2015, 2016, it was the same time because it's in the same areas, kind of like, where a lot of Assassin's Creed 2 was set as well. And there's a shit ton still of Assassin's Creed themed shops. And you would have like the Ezio Auditore on one side and then Bell and Edward on the other.
It's so
Those
depressing.
places.
Look, I can
And
judge, but
people
like,
were
am I gonna
jumping.
go to Crema when I go to Italy because of Call Me by Your Name? Yeah. So like, I can't really judge the Twilighters too much, right?
I wish there were Call Me by Your Name shops.
It would just sell
Page
I hope,
peaches,
each.
right? It would
I
just be
hope there
peaches,
are.
I guess. Just a huge pile of peaches
I I I
and tissue
lived
boxes, I
near
Toast.
guess.
I lived
I
near
will
the
be buying
courtyard
one.
that was in Harry Potter, the courtyard that they used for like all the exterior shots of the castle. I live near the cathedral that was filmed
Ooh.
there,
Oh,
and
interesting.
Oh.
it's really small. Movie magic is a miracle. But every now and then you see like Harry Potter fans walking up to what is an active cathedral, going, "Oh, I wonder if Harry Potter's there." It's
Ha.
clearly not. It's
Oh, that's
clearly
so
not there.
sad.
Love that.
Yeah.
Honestly, if it was legal to spit at people in the streets, that Harry Potter fans would get a big ball of phlegm.
They're just
I've got
nerds.
respect. I've got respect for Twilight fans because it takes a lot of. It just takes guts to publicly admit to liking something so shit. Like that's a nerve. That's some nerve. It's
And all,
really just wonderful.
and all the mental gymnastics and justifying it,
Yeah,
legitimately liking it. I liking it's like, well, because it's funny. It's like, no, like I actually feel passionately about this. It's like there's a lot of there's a lot of
yeah. Woody Allen could have directed the Twilight movies, and nobody would have batted an eyelid.
well,
That's something
probably
I'd like
not
to
at the
see.
time, probably later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Edward would have been really neurotic, I hate
Yeah.
myself so much. Can you imagine?
Jesse
That would
Eisenberg as
be.
Edward.
It would just be
You can,
Woody Allen. He's like, I'm 108 and I'm pursuing a teenage girl. This is a documentary.
he already did that. He did Crisis in Six Scenes with, I think it was Miley Cyrus.
He's like, this is what I do. Yeah, exactly.
Can't wait for his new movie.
Uh,
Yay, everyone's gonna watch it like Rifkin's Festival. Big success.
mm.
Anyway, on that note, I think it's time for the final question of this episode. After this entire conversation, at the end of the day, which do you think it's best? The book or the film of Twilight? Carson, why don't you go first?
I mean, it has to be the film, right? I mean, like, sorry, the book is bad. I'm a big Twilight stan, I guess, now, but like, the book is just bad. We have to say it.
How about you, Hillary? Are you pro book or pro film? Well, I think answer's easy, but
Definitely pro film. Pro film. The book is complete garbage. If I saw, like I mentioned, I had nieces earlier. If I saw them reading it, I would have a serious discussion with them. And actually, I saw them earlier this week, and they overheard me talking about it, and I hope that they took some of the things I said to heart, because I bet they hear a lot of positive things about it at home or aren't aware of it as
Mm.
much. And I just made it really clear while they were in the room. I was just like, that's not something that teenage girls should be reading or anything. But the books are hilarious. Not the books, the films are hilarious. And I have very fond memories of watching them, and I probably will like aspects of those films and carry that with me throughout the rest of my life.
Some good memories there. Some good memories. Ewan, it's your turn.
Oh, it's
This is
a
a
real
hard
difficult
choice.
one. Yeah, well, it's funny you should mention that we've got to pick one, because I have actually found a line of dialogue in the book that kind of summarizes my thoughts on Stephenie Meyer's writing. And this is said, page 274 for those of us with the now a major motion picture book. The second page after chapter 15, The Cullens, if you'd like to read along at home, if you have your copy present. Of course you do.
Everyone's
and it's
stopping
when
the
Edward...
podcast to go read it.
Yeah, give yourself a minute. Settle in, pause this, get a cup of tea, get yourself sat down. And it's just the line when Edward goes to Belle, and I imagine this is Edward talking to Stephenie Meyer. You're not that creative. And that kind of surmises my thoughts on the book. It's not a very good book, We've read some shit for this podcast.
We have.
I think this one's the one that kind of rotted my brain the most. Like, 50 Shades of Grey was at least funny. Bones and All at least was a
short.
Short, yes. Especially when you zoom in on a PDF that small. Twilight just felt really dull. The film's obviously a lot better because it's a lot more fun. You can kind of experience that with other people. I think that's the fundamental draw of it, is that you can view that. You can see it with other people. You can't read a book with someone. Well, you kind of can, but it's a bit difficult. But the film you can watch with other people. You can experience the disaster with other people. I would happily watch the rest of the films in that series if it was with another person.
We can schedule a watch along if you want, of everyone joining together.
I'll fly back to Italy. I'll bring the Blu-rays.
I'll crack open the Campari just for you.
Oh god, that I'm pretty
careful,
sure
guys. Be very, very careful. Don't get drunk while watching Twilight. Yes.
Hangover 4, the Twilight edition.
Oh man, I
We'll
mean,
see what happens.
I've already been drunk for one screening of a Tilda Swinton film. I'm sure she's in one of the Twilight movies. Do you remember that, Nick? When I showed up?
I do.
Wait, what movie?
Good memories. Eternal Daughter.
The Eternal Daughter. I was fucking hammered.
Probably would have helped.
Steaming. Yeah. I fell asleep for sure. I was in the front row.
You were seven seats away from Tilda Swinton and Joanna Hogg.
I love the idea of them coming up after the film to do like the Q&A, and you're just asleep in the first row.
Oh man,
love it.
Brutal.
It's not my proudest moment, but to be fair, when double vodka cokes are that cheap, you don't pass it up. Wonderful time.
Good memories. Speaking of good memories, I completely agree. I think the film of Twilight is so superior in every way. It's just fun. It's become a genuine guilty pleasure for me. Maybe without even the guilt. That's kind of the interesting thing about Twilight. There would have been a lot of guilt back in 2008 and even 2015, but now I think everything has kind of changed to the point that it's more problematic to like Harry Potter than Twilight, which is something I would have never expected. Or at least supporting Twilight and Harry Potter. It's bizarre. We're living in weird times, people. But I'm happy. Like, I'm watching it. I'm having fun. It makes me happy. I can laugh at the movie. Sometimes it feels like I'm laughing with the movie. And I'm very much happy that we're living in a time as well where Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have managed to prove their worth time and time again, to the point that they don't really carry over the shadow of Twilight anymore, I think. Except for maybe, very, very bigoted mainstream audience members who are still like, Edward plays Batman. I remember that was a whole big thing when it was announced, because otherwise I do think they've both proven to be incredible performers in more ways than one. So yeah, this is it for this episode of the Death by Adaptation podcast. Time to roll open the red carpet and everyone can promote themselves on social media. Hillary, how about you? I don't think you haven't mentioned the video project as well. You teased it early.
A video project? Oh yeah.
Twilight.
You can find that. Well, my
Cool.
social media, probably the easiest way to find me is on Letterboxd. I'm under the moniker Laudanum at 33. Now, if you get to my profile, there's a campsite bio link you can click on that's like a link tree. And if
Mhm.
you go to that and scroll down to Exposure, which is a kind of like a website publishing site, which sounds kind of like a misnomer, but if you go there, you can find the Twilight Blaha, which is like a huge nest of everything I've done that's Twilight related. That goes for like 8 years or something like that. So you can find all
Amazing.
the video projects I've done, all the writing I've done, artwork that my friends have made that are related to it. It's a huge Twilight treasure chest of all that stuff. So that's what I'm promoting. Laudanum at 33 on Letterboxd. Click on Campsite, click on Exposure. It'll take you to all the Twilight stuff.
Incredible. I cannot wait to dive into this, honestly. I'm saving it for tomorrow morning to start the week on the right foot.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Someone will be going there.
Yeah. Carson, how about you? Where can the listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at BP_movie reviews, at Letterboxd Carson Timar. You can find me on a bunch of websites, but also on Clabbercast on YouTube and all
Yeah.
podcast platforms every single week, talking about the newest in cinema.
And TV. I listened to the
And
Velma
TV, yeah.
episode and The Last of Us recently. It was a lot of fun. I think
Yeah.
you and Paul are in top form recently. How about you, Ewan? Where can the listeners find you? This is your favorite part. You love it. You know it.
They can't leave me alone. No, they can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd. Ewan Gleadow, EWANGLEADOW. And they can get my writing on Cult Following, Daily Star, Daily Mirror, Clapper, other places as well, I imagine, at some point. And you can get my podcast as well, Don't Listen to This, where I looked at lots of albums. Two of the people currently present on this podcast have also appeared to hear me. I think, Nick, you were on for when I compared Velvet Underground to a modern pop band that are really terrible.
Yes.
Yes. And Carson, you and me are going to be talking about Lana Del Rey soon because she's
Oh.
dared to present another album, which is wonderful stuff. But yeah, that's. I can't think of anywhere else that I'm at apart from rent free in the minds of Twilight fans.
Making everyone angry, one cult following post at a time.
Hey, they're
Yeah.
really getting worse. They're getting dangerously bad, these comments. Like, I had another one today that just called me a disingenuous arsehole. I was like, okay, I guess. I'm not disparaging. I'm not disagreeing.
They can get more creative than that, I think.
That one
Yeah.
had some flair. I mean, if
It
someone
did.
called me that, I'd be kind of like, that's not true, but I like your word choices.
I got called an inadequate lowbrow critic. This is for a review of an Ava Max album. It's not exactly like I'm setting the world on fire. I said it was fine. But yeah, people are horrible. Please feel free to direct your hate towards my website because I get ad revenue when you do. So it's a win-win for me. It's brilliant because I get an email and then I go to my comment section and then I just click spam and that's it. What are they going to do? You rats.
So much power. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, NickyGra97. There you can find links to everything: my short films, my YouTube reviews, all of the good stuff, my Clapper articles, letterboxd writing. And of course, you can follow this podcast on Twitter and Instagram, respectively, Death Adaptation and Death by Adaptation Pod. Stay tuned because 2 weeks from now, we'll be back, and I will be joined by a good friend of mine, Rafael Felix, Portuguese critic, to talk about something different. Because I was thinking, you know what, we talked about Twilight, a book written by a woman, a book that's very controversial and that has a lot of problematic elements to it. And I wanted to balance out the bad with some good, which is why we're talking about Annie Ernaux's L'Evénement, aka Happening. So stay tuned for that. It's great conversation. And yes, I hope you enjoy that. And I hope you have a fantabulous day. Bye bye.